In this video, we're going to focus on editing run stitches. And you can see that I have this design open, and this is from a previous video where we were talking about actually creating a run stitch. And you'll remember probably that I hit undo a couple times that brought this back to where it was no longer in the shape that I had it. So as I explain what we're doing, I'm going to go ahead and just talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do. So in this video, we're going to focus on the different types of things you can do to edit these run stitches and the properties for them. And you can see I was just kind of editing this shape. If I click on it here, I'm using the shape edit tool. So if I click here, you'll notice that this is the shape edit tool. And for some reason, this is that other icon was showing because I was doing that in a different video, adding a hole to a fill stitch. But the shape edit tool is located right here. And this is how we edit the outlines. So this is when you want to edit the direction of stitches and things like that. If I zoom in here, you'll see that I can move the lines around. I can bend the shapes using these handlebars. The only time I can access this form of editing is using the shape edit tool. If I click on the selection tool and I go back to the original thing, you'll notice that the edit tool isn't right here. But if I select this, notice that once it's selected, the shape edit tool comes up. So you can access it right here from the floating toolbar. And notice that once I did that, it changed again. And this is going to show me the different things that I can do. And what I can see, like right now, it's showing the outlines and it's showing the entry and exit points. I could turn that off and now it hides that, and I can just focus on the outlines. I could turn it back on if I want, and then they come back on. This is a really cool features. And so editing running stitches is just like editing artwork. So if you watch that section, we're still working with a line. This is not actual stitches here. Those are virtual representations. So even though when I click on this, click off of it, and you see the stitches here, it's showing you exactly what the stitches are going to look like. The one thing to keep in mind is that it's virtual at this point, and it hasn't actually created the stitches. The reason I know that is if I click and drag, I can see the outline there. That is just showing me that a run stitch has been applied to it, but I'm just seeing it on the screen at this point. That's what allows me to really come in and edit this, and not only edit the lines, but also the properties. And so you can click and drag, you can change the type of point that it is. This right here is showing me it's a cusp right here. I could change it to a smooth. And by smooth, what it does is allows me to have a more curved shape right there. If I do symmetrical, it's going to have the same distance on these handlebars. If I click and drag one, it drags the other one, so it keeps it very symmetrical. I can make it a line by right-clicking on hit line or hitting line right here, and that just makes it a kind of a straight point. And that's why I don't have any handlebars right there to drag, because it's actually a straight point. And those are the different things that you can do for editing. You can move it around. The other things that you can do is you can right-click and you can add another point. If you needed to have another point there for further editing, you can do that. So let's do that over here. Like I'll add a point, and you'll just see that that just allows me to grab something else and manipulate it by that point. I can also right click and choose to split the line, and you'll see that's an icon here as well. You get a lot of the features right here in the floating toolbar when you're in edit mode. So you can right click on a point or just up here use the split line. So I'm going to click on that, and what that does is you see that it moved that start point and end point. The reason it did is because now that line is separated. I split it at that point. I can hit undo a couple times here, get it back to where it was, and you'll see that if I click and drag, it is combined now. So the split just lets you take a closed shape and break it apart. And I could do it in multiple places. I could break it here by splitting it. I could come over here and select this one and split it right here too. And if I select that and I move it, you can see that I've just broken that whole piece away from the rest of it. Now, that is just something that is very handy to do at times. And so it's important to know that you can do that. And I can come in here and I could edit this further any way that I want. I can close this line because it's open, just like this one. Let's do this one just because it's longer distance here. If I right click on it and I choose close line, now what it does is it actually closes it up. So now it's a shape and not just a open-ended line. And so you have that ability as well, that you can do things like splitting it and closing it. And you can do things like insert points before and after. So if I choose to insert points before, I'm going onto this line, and you can see that it put it right there. So if I click right here and I right mouse click, what it did is it allowed me to insert a few of them at one time. And if I did it after, it would have allowed me to put those lines in on the other side. So if I was really trying to edit this shape, I could add points that way. So those are the basic editing of the outline shapes. And if you've spent much time with the artwork tools, you know how those work because they work identical here. The next thing is to look at the properties. And when it comes to a run stitch, each stitch type has its own unique editing features. So up here we have a run tab, and then we have a run extra tab. This is the main things that we do with a run stitch. This is where we choose the type. Like right here, it's a single run, and that just means that it's just going to go around one time. And I can hit this drop down, I can do a double run. Let's take a look at what the single run does first. If I do a slow redraw, you can see that it's starting right here for this shape, and it's going to go around and it ends right there. So it went over at one time. That's a single run. I can come over here and choose a double run, and let's go ahead and do a slow redraw of that. It had a hard time keeping up there. Okay, so right here is where it is going to start. It's going to go, and then it's going to go again for a double run. So that's nice. You don't have to copy and paste and create two lines to do it double. You can do it that way. You can change it to a motif pattern. So if I hit apply here, it's applying this motif that I can change to whatever I want. And I can, it's kind of limitless on what options I have there. I can modify the motif as much as I want. That's not for this video, but it's important to know that you can do that. And let me go back to the single run and hit apply. And you can see it just brings it right back. One of the things that you will adjust quite often is the stitch length. So right now the stitch length is 2.5 millimeters. And let me turn this off 3D view, and you can see the points here. Each one is 2.5 millimeters apart. So if I select it, I could change that to, let's say, 4, and it's going to make it 4 millimeters apart. You can see that it spreads it out. And so that will greatly affect the number of stitches in a design. And the longer the stitch, the more more loft it has, the more it'll stay on top of the fabric. I typically will use around a 3 millimeter on just a standard shape that has some curves and stuff to it. The other thing that we have here is we have this drop run stitch, and it says at anchor. Okay, so let me turn this to none, and let's just see what happens here. you can see that it affected this line right here. Let me do undo, just focus in this area right here, and hit redo, and you can see that it's not as crisp of a line. That means that it's kind of making some adjustments on the fly. Let me go to chord gap here and hit apply, and you didn't see much of a change there. Go back to none. We'll go from none to chord gap and just kind of more focus in these corner areas. And you can see it's a really tight corner there. These are things that you can play around with, and at anchor is the default. And what that means is kind of your anchors would be like these points here, where it's kind of going in and out of a corner. And if you drop it a run stitch at the anchor, have it do that, that means it's going to keep the shape quite a bit more. It's going to make it follow the shape much better. And if you don't have that on, you can see things like this. You see how this happens right here. You can see the run stitch jumps across. It actually doesn't even create that point there. The moment I take it back to add anchor or at anchor, you'll notice that this will come back and be a nice tight shape. See how that works? So it's important to understand how these things work. Default is great. It works perfect. I don't ever change it from there, but you can change it and you can get some different results. So let's just change it to chord gap again, and let's just take a look. You can see up here in this area, it did change some. So if I hit undo, you can see these points right here. Watch that they get tighter. See how that works? So it's going to allow you to kind of follow a shape a little closer. So what it's going to do is it's not going to maintain the stitch length quite as much. It's going to make changes along the way to help you go around a corner. This one maintains that 2.5 millimeter stitch length, or 3 that I have it set at, much better. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can always come in here and just turn on the stitch points and modify some things. Just take a look at what it's doing. So that is some of the changes that you can make right here. But let's go take a look at the Run Extra tab. This is where things can get kind of fun. So right now you can see that it says a bean style is set at none. That means that we're just dealing with the standard run stitch. If I want a bean stitch, I can come in here and just choose a bean. And the moment I do that, I get options that come up. And you can see stitch length random range is set at 0. You can just change the randomness of the stitch length right here. Stitch length random offset, it will actually offset stitches a little bit if you change that. But really the most things that we do is right here in the bean repeat. A standard bean is a 3-ply, meaning it will go, each stitch will go forward, back, forward. Then it'll progress forward, back, forward, forward, back, forward. And that creates a nice thick line. But you can do a 5-ply, a 7-ply, a 9-ply, and 11-ply. And so what does that mean? If I do a 7, it'll go like forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. And then it will come forward and then go to the next one, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. And that creates even thicker line. So it's just going in progression from one point to another and back. And if I bring up the grid, this will kind of help to show what I'm talking about. So if the stitches are going, it'll come and go to this point, it'll come back, and it'll keep going back and forth as many times that you have it set. If it's 3-ply, it's like it goes 1, 2, and then 3. If it's a 5-ply, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it continues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And same thing with 7, it just goes 7 times 9 and 11. And the more passes you have, the thicker the line is. So let's come back over to here. I'm going to choose this bean, and I'm going to just do a 5-ply. And then I'm not going to have a bean repeat style. I'm just going to hit apply here. And so let's just come in, and you can see that it's already kind of started going. But I have a 5 ply, and this right here, this tool and this slow redraw will do the next stitch. So it'll show what it's going to do. So let's just take a quick look here. I'll go forward, back, forward, back, forward. And then the next stitch, forward, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how bean stitches work. And it's all based on the number that you have selected for that bean. So let's just take a look here. You have a standard bean and you have a varying. The varying bean is something that's new in this in the latest update of the Floriani software. This is something that I had in the works for quite a while, and I wanted to get in, and I'm glad to see that's finally there. This varying right here, you can see the bean pattern length, it says 6. But notice these dots over here. Let's go ahead and click on that. What this does is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, there's 6 repeats here. And what this is the bean pattern. So I can choose anywhere from 1 to 11, like in odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So let's just take a look. I'm going to do 1 here. I'm going to do 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, and hit OK. And then I'm going to come over here and hit apply. So let's take a look at what this is doing. I'm going to go ahead and change this color of this stitch so that I can make sure that I'm getting to the right one here. So we're getting here. Here's where we're starting. I'm going to hit this next stitch button. Turn off the grid so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go next stitch. This is doing the lock stitch right there to get started. So there's the first one, forward, and then it's going to go forward again because I had a 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. So this one's going to be a 3 ply. It's going to go forward like it just did, back, forward, and then it's going to do a 5 ply. Forward, back, forward, back, forward. Then it's going to do a 7 ply. Forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward. Then a 9. Forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward. And then 11. And watch it, and then watch what happens when it gets to that last one. It's going to go forward 1, and then do a 3, and then a 5. So it's going to repeat that pattern the way I have it set. So here it's going to repeat this. It's going to do 1, then 3, then 5, then 7, then 9, then 11. Then it's going to go back to 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And it's going to continue that. So what you would see is a line that starts really thin, and then it gets thicker, and then it gets really thin again, and then it gets thicker, and then it gets really thin again, and then thicker. And so that's something to keep in mind, because if you want it to kind of vary a little bit more, what you might do is do a 1, 5, and then let's do 11, and then I might go down to the 5 again, 3, and then you can kind of range it however you want. I would probably do it with fewer of these though. So if I wanted to do 1, 3, and then to 5, 7, and then back down, I could do that. Let's do it with 3 though. So I'm going to do a 1, a 5, and then a 9, and then a 5, and that's it, because I want to go back to the 3. So so 1, sorry, I know it probably sounds confusing. I'm trying to get how many pattern lengths I need. So I have 1, and then I'm going to go to 3, 5, and then 3. 1, 3, 5, 3. So I'm going to have 4 of them. So I'm going to go to 4, and then I'm going to hit this, and you can see that it allows me to get 4. So 1, 3, 5, and then I'm going to go back down to a 3. But I'm not going to go to 1 again, because if I do 1, then it's going to do 1 twice. If that makes sense. It's going to go back to 1 after it finishes the 3. So all that's going to do is go thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, and it's going to be more even than going from 1 to 11 and then back to a 1. The 1 next to 11 would look very, very noticeable, and you might want that. That's okay. But this way it's kind of more gradual. So I'm just saying that to keep that in mind, that you can do things like that. And let's go back to this Run Extra tab. And this time, let's not do a varying. Let's go back to standard, hit apply. Let's do this like 3. Let's now click on half bean. And when I do that, it's going to take all the other stuff away. You can see that what it's doing is it's creating this angled stitch. So you'll see it's kind of more of a jagged stitch, and basically what's happening is it's going forward, coming back. So if I do this slow redraw again, and we'll get to this point just to show you how it progresses. See how that half bean, so it goes forward all the way, then it comes back halfway. Then it goes forward the entire stitch length, then it comes back half. That's why it's called a half bean. It doesn't go all the way forward and all the way back. It goes back halfway. Make sense? So let's go ahead and click on it, and let's take a look at what your options are. Now you have a stitch length random range where you can do it random, stitch length random factor, or you can do an offset the bean from -80 to 80. So let's just see what happens if I type in a value of 20 here and hit apply. What you're noticing is it's varying this in a percentage of a 20. So if I go to a -20, let's just see what that will look like here, and hit apply, you'll see that it's going the opposite direction. If I go to 50, you can see that it's kind of more straight up and down. It's the amount, it's the percentage of the angle of this bean stitch. And let's go to 0, and that was the default. So I might only do a little bit, but what that does is it just allows me to control the amount of the curve. See, like this is pretty close, and it's kind of nice because it will create kind of a thick line, but it won't look as choppy as it does on the screen here. So those are some options you have. Let's go back to the bean, regular bean, and hit apply. Now let's just see what happens when we kind of play around with these other settings here. So with this bean, let's go ahead and do a stitch random. Let's just say 5 and hit apply. You can see that it did not like that at all. It just took it all away. So let's go back here and let's just do like a 0.5. And let's take a look at this. So if I turn on these stitch points, this might help us a little bit. Let's go in and do a 1. What this is doing is it's varying the bean length here. So you'll see that some are closer together and some are further apart. It's just varying. It's varying the length of the bean stitch. So it kind of can help give it a little bit more of a hand look. Like you can see when I get into 2, you can really see the difference. These are much closer together than this one's a little further apart. And so just to kind of show you how that works is just making it imperfect, if you will. And so it's kind of a cool little feature. Let's go ahead and put this back to 0, and let's look at what this stitch length random offset will do. Let's do a 20 here and hit apply and click off of it. And you don't see, much of a change there. If you do that one, you don't either, but let's see what happens when we do this. So you have, it's adjusting this length, so some are closer and farther apart. I'm still not really seeing a whole lot of change with this stitch length random offset. And So, you might get some different results with that. And let's look at it more when we have a half a bean. And this is set at 20. Let's go to 0 and hit apply. So this is where the default was for the half bean. Put that back to 0 here. And let's go into this stitch length offset random here, and let's hit 80. And you're not seeing a whole lot of change. So it's not doing a whole lot that I can see. And so that's just something that may or may not be working right, or it just might not be making that much of a change. You can see it did change it quite a bit there. Let's go to undo and redo. Let me click off of it though and redo. I'm kind of focusing in this area right here and looking at these. So it will offset them a little bit, but it's not a whole lot there. But those are the different things that you can do with the bean stitches. So you definitely want to play around with it. Defaults are at 0 here, and we have the standard, and then we'll go back to the beginning. But there's a lot of different things you can do inside of here, and the only way you can access them is through the run extra. Now, something to keep in mind, you have a single run here. You want to have the single run if you're going to go in with the bean stitches. Okay, so it's just something that you want to do. Make sure it's a single run for the bean. Other things that you can do with the run stitch is you can control start and end commands, which I talk about a lot. I don't really do much with start and end commands. If I know that I need to do a trim at the end of it, I will put that. If it's a color change, it will automatically trim. But if I want to make sure that it trims after something is stitched, I can put that there. I can also make it a jump stitch, so it'll jump to the next one. And that's an end command. I can have it jump or trim before the object starts too by changing the start command. There are a number of things. Normal is default. Everyone knows what a jump is. It will jump either to it or after it. And then you have a trim. And then you can actually have a stop. Now, I'll just say for the next two, you don't necessarily have the ability to control it for every machine. Some machines do automatic stuff, or it'll ignore some commands, but you can just test it yourself. So if I had it stop at the start of it, what that should do is before it starts stitching this sequence here, the machine should stop. And it won't start again until you hit start again, until you hit that start button. So it should just stop in place, and that could be something like if you're doing applique or you're doing anything where you need to lay something down or you need to trim something, whatever you might need to do, and you want it to just stop either before or after it, you can use this command. But you have to test it on your machine, and if your machine's not doing it, you might have to contact your machine manufacturer to see if there's a setting that's on by default on your machine that's preventing that command from taking place, if that makes sense. So I can go to normal. The other thing is you have this frame out. And the frame out is a pretty cool feature that works, I know, on commercial machines. I'm not 100% sure on home machines. What this will do is, if this was a placement stitch for applique and I needed to lay the fabric down and it was in like a tight area, I could have it do a frame out. And what that will do is once it finishes this running stitch, the frame will move forward away from the needles to where I could lay the fabric down or do what I needed. And then when I hit start, it'll move back in place where it was and start stitching again. Same thing if I was doing a tack down stitch for applique and I needed to trim the fabric after it tacked it down. I could do a frame out at the end of that tack down stitch, and it would just move forward, giving me room to kind of trim out around it, and I can hit start again. So basically, I don't have to remove the hoop in that situation. So that's kind of how that works, and not every machine will let you do that, just so you know. You'll have to test it on your end to see if it works for your machine. I can't tell you what all machines it will or will not work with, and I can't tell you if you would have to contact the manufacturer to change the setting in order to let it happen. So I'm going to put these back to normal, but those are the different start and end commands you have. And this is what you mostly will change, is your tie-in and tie-off stitches. So this is, you have basic or triangle whenever you're using a run stitch, and that's what we're focused on right now. You always use basic. A triangle will make a little triangle either at the tie-in or the tie-off, and it's very noticeable on a run stitch. So basic is what you want to do, and so you have to decide if you want to tie in or tie off a stitch, and that's all based off what came before it and where it's located. Like if it's really close and this one is just starting where the other one left off, then you would maybe not need to do a tie off, and you would not need to do a tie in for the next object. So there's if you're part of the masterclass, Digitizing masterclass, you learn all about lock stitches and how they work. So you'll definitely want to look at that unit on lock stitches. So I can hit apply there. The other things you have with a run stitch is just your basic transform box or tab. This is available for anything that you select. You can change the width, the height, and rotate a little bit. This is a basic settings that you can access. And they're pretty self-explanatory here, width or height, however much you want to do. Put the value at, or you can do it by a percentage. So if I want to make this 100 or 90% of the width, I can type in 90 and hit apply, and it's going to resize it. I can rotate it by a certain amount, 33 degrees, let's say, and hit apply, and it's going to rotate it that much. Or I can just use that to rotate it. But if I need it specific, that's a good place to do it. So that kind of wraps up what you can do with a running stitch. In the next section, we're going to talk about a steel stitch and how you can modify it.